Why do I like vintage? This is going to be a tough one. How do I do a video in like 10 minutes, 12 minutes or less, sharing all the ways I like vintage baseball cards? This is going to be a tough one to share with James and Saul and everyone, but I guess I'm going to have to give it a shot. So, all right, I'll do my darndest. Just too many rabbit holes to go down, but all right, here we go. Hey everyone, I'm John. I collect cards. Hope you're all doing well. Hope you're having a good weekend thus far. It's Sunday night, October 13th, and I am doing a VR for James Elite Hunters, who asked us to share with Saul, BD Kane, and James and everyone why we love collecting vintage baseball. So hey Saul, this is why I like collecting vintage. And after that intro, I had to give it a little more thought and try to just sort of home in on kind of like three, maybe four things. And in a nutshell, I guess it's a combination of connections that I can make in various ways, the art and design of the cards themselves, a love of history, and a joy of learning and discovering. So I'd say, maybe three of those kind of go together, with the kind of art and design being maybe separate. But with those thoughts in mind, the connecting, the art, the joy of discovery, I'm gonna try to share a few cards here and just kind of talk about why I really enjoy the vintage side of the hobby. Now I still collect a little bit of current stuff and modern stuff since I rejoined the hobby 4 years ago, but vintage is really where my heart is in the hobby. And so I'm showing three cards here from 1954 Topps to get us started. Hoyt Wilhelm, Gil Hodges, and Larry Doby, all Hall of Famers. And one of the first kind of like real like joy that I experienced getting back in the hobby was kind of just really loving and appreciating the 1954 Topps set, for reasons I've talked about numerous times on my channel. But basically, it was my dad and my grandfather, the New York Giants, were their favorite team, and they won the series that year. But on top of that, the design of the cards are just, iconic. And so a combination of that connection and the design of the cards just really drew me to the set, to the point where I ended up wanting to collect the whole thing. And over a couple of years, I did just that. So I just thought I'd share three cards here just to kind of get us started here. But I really enjoyed building the 54 Topps set while going down other vintage roads. But just in the last like several months, earlier this year, I kind of stumbled on or settled upon a new goal. And this is kind of the discovery joy of just making connections and just continuing the journey, or the rabbit hole, if you will, which I touched on at the start of the video. So a lot of people, I'll put some cards up again in a second, but most people watching this will know that not every Hall of Famer, current Hall of Famer, is represented in 54 Topps because of the exclusives that Topps and Bowman were, kind of had going against each other in a prolonged battle in the industry. And I came to realize that I really wanted to obtain the other Hall of Famers who are not in the top set. And so I started a pretty serious goal for that this year. It's not a big goal in terms of cards. It's for my count, and I'm pretty sure it's the right number, but it's possible I'm not right. And but I think it's 14 cards in terms of players who are enshrined in the Hall of Fame in the gallery, essentially in the main area of the hall. And I say that because I know a player like Carl Erskine just got received the Lifetime Achievement Award by the Hall of Fame a year or two ago. I'm not sure if you'd count that technically as being in the Hall of Fame, since he's not in the main gallery with a plaque and everything. in terms of the main plaque. Although I might end up buying his Bowman card at some point anyway, and just make it a 15 card goal per se. But for all intents and purposes, it's a 14 card goal, and I actually have 9 of the cards now for that set, and it's been just a joy picking those up. And I'm actually going to show 2 new pickups that I haven't shown before. One is Enos Slaughter that I just added, and then this one, which is kind of the one that kind of got me really thinking I wanted to do this, is the Roy Campanella. I just think this, I mean, this is, again, this kind of goes to the art. It looks like a simple portrait, but there's just something about this portrait in particular that just kind of pulls me in as a vintage, vintage baseball card aficionado, one who enjoys baseball history, our country's history to a large degree as well. Kind of involves all of that. And there's just something about this card that I just absolutely love. And it was this card that really made me decide I wanted to go down this road of collecting the 14 cards. Now I have 5 to go, and 2 of them are huge. One being the Mickey Mantle from Bowman, and then one being the Stan Musial, which I want to get his Red Heart card from this year. So it will be a huge goal to wrap up, and it'll take much longer than a year, because it's been less than a year since I started this to get the first 9. But it'll be a cool goal to continue to do in the months and years to come. But just going down, kind of enjoying other sets. Just vintage has made me just enjoy learning about sets that maybe I heard about in passing. And I was out of the hobby for a long time. So as a teenager, while I was still collecting and started first buying vintage baseball cards, about maybe a dozen or so before I kind of fell out of the hobby. I had heard of, say, 1933 Gaudy, but I really wasn't aware of Diamond Stars, and I really wasn't aware of Tattoo Orbit, or Batter Up. All kind of classic card issues from the early to mid 1930s. And it's been so fun getting acquainted by learning about those sets, but also starting to pick up a couple of examples from those sets. And so the most recent pickup actually I wanted to share here in this video is this card right here. I just picked up my first Batter Up card. This was a Robert Edward Auctions win that I had in their latest auction, their fall auction that just ended maybe 2-3 weeks ago. And I just really love this card. It's an SGC3, and gosh, here's an example where the old SGC label, SGC flip, just works with the color. It's a green color, green tinted color example of Melot's pose. I just love that it's an actual photograph used rather than the Gaudy cards that he has, which are pretty iconic and also pretty pricey. This one is available for a decent, fraction of what you could get the Gaudy cards for. It's a blank back. That's part of the reason. But gosh, I absolutely love picking this up. I love having a Melot in the collection. Again, another New York Giant legend. I'm a Yankees fan, but if I lived in the 50s or earlier, I probably would have been a New York Giants fan, like my dad and grandfather were. So they both grew up in, my dad grew up in Manhattan. My grandfather did as well. So I'm my his dad. So it's just, that's where my baseball, knowledge came from, and sort of, just where I learned about the game and the history of the game from. And so I just loved picking up this card recently. But, let me show a few other cards here and try to not go completely off the rails in this video. But, I mentioned history, and part of that is grand moments in baseball history. And so I'm going to stick with the Giants here for a couple of cards. Here's a 1952 Bowman Bobby Thompson. Really love the look of this card. I love the front of it. SGC5. but I really like the back of this card too. Um, I mean, I love the polo grounds represented there with it's just the part of the upper deck facade, but it's clear what that is. It's most likely they might not be the polo ground. It's possible that it's not. It could be representative of Connie Mack Stadium, possibly, or Shibe Park if it was back in the early '50s, since Bowman was in Philly. But he is wearing. It looks like it does say Giants more than New York on the jersey there, so probably representative of the Polo Grounds, but it doesn't truly matter. But just a fantastic front. I really love the back though. Fans are not going to forget Bobby's one-out, last of the ninth home run in the third playoff game against the Dodgers last fall. It drove in 3 runs, gave the Giants the game 5-4, and with it the pennant. You can practically hear Russ Hodges making the call. Giants win the pennant. This really just puts you in the moment, even though it was only a few months after it happened that this card came out, and so it just kind of brings you that much closer to the time it made, and it doesn't feel as much like history. It almost feels like just last fall kind of a thing, assuming, say, you got this in the spring of '52. So it's just an awesome card. I love this one for that reason. And then another example of that is, let's put this in the middle so the next card hopefully stays in focus. Here's an example of a card that's not in good condition. I just picked it up because of the back mostly, but it's Dusty Rhodes of the Giants. It's actually card number 1 of 1955 Topps. And the reason for that is because of his heroics in 1954 in the World Series. No baseball fan will ever forget Dusty's amazing batting feats that led the Giants to the '54 World Championship. During the regular season, his sensational pinch hitting provided the Giants margin of victory time after time. In the series, he continued to astound the baseball world by winning the first game with a homer and playing the major role in the Giants' 4-game sweep. I believe, I actually can't remember if he was the MVP of the World Series that year. I want to say he was, because of his heroics. Now, of course, Willie Mays earlier in this game made the over-the-shoulder back to home plate, the catch off of Vic Wertz. That pretty much saved the game in most respects for the Giants, and enabled Dusty to hit that home run to win Game 1, and what kind of set them on their way for the 4-game sweep. But just love cards like that with backs like that just put you in the moment. Really cool. It makes it I don't know what's the right word, contemporary, or just kind of just put you right there, like it just happened recently rather than decades ago at this point, or more than a half a century ago at this point. Much more than that, actually. It's like 75 years ago almost, right? A little over 70? Yeah, 70 years ago. So, yeah. Here's an example of another reason I love vintage. I love knowing that cards were enjoyed also. And when I say that, that means, they might be pretty beat up, but, it kind of contributes to the story piece. I love cards that tell a story, whether it's on the back of the cards like we just saw, or on a card like this, just on the front. And you can tell that this card has been through the ringer. It may have gone through a laundry washing machine, maybe even. Well, maybe not that, but maybe it was in some kid's pocket. Maybe he won it in a trade or in a game or something, and carried it home in his pocket while he was bicycling back home for dinner. I'm just talking that on my butt, but it's just such an awesome. I love this card, as destroyed as it is with all that paper loss from creases. Here's the back. I just love having this card. And another reason I love having it is that it's my first Mickey Mantle. So, there are moments in. Another reason why I love vintage is that there are moments I've encountered in the hobby along the way since I got back in 4 years ago that are kind of firsts that are more special to me than I would think that they would or should be, but they are. I mean, just picking this card up again, I'll show it one more time. I love picking this card up. I just, I saw a few at the National earlier this year. I actually am really thinking about wanting the Jimmy Fox card from this set as well, to kind of have a Jimmy Fox in my collection. Like, this will be almost certainly be the only Mel Ott I have in my collection. And I just love having a Melot, and I love this particular one. But there's just, firsts like that, first batter up card, first Melot card, just things like that just sort of, they're again examples of why I love vintage. There's something about it that just kind of pulls me in. And you know what also pulls me in? It's the art of the cards themselves. This is going to go about 20 minutes probably, guys, and that's with me picking up the pace. But as you can tell, Saul and James, I just enjoy vintage baseball, baseball cards, and vintage baseball in general. I mean, I love today's game to a decent degree, but not as much as the past game. The game is different now in a lot of ways. Still a super fun game to watch in person or on TV. My Yankees get started tomorrow night in the ALCS, so hoping they can turn on the offense and start playing like the 93, 94 win team that they were in the regular season, because the Royals actually gave them a pretty good run. But we'll see what happens against Cleveland. Cleveland's tough, so it's going to be a tough series. And Dodgers-Mets should be a really good series, I think, too. But let's get back to vintage. I'm going to show 3 cards here that employ color. I love the use of color in vintage baseball. Like, and who doesn't? But just the creative ways it could be used, and still, I guess the equivalent today maybe would be all those parallels that are in today's modern cards. But there's just so many of them. It just takes away from when there's 50 parallels for a Topps Chrome card. It's like, okay, there's lots of fun colors, but it's also kind of, I don't know, it gets to be kind of ridiculous after a while. It's just not the same. So I'm talking about cards like this. Look at the color on that. When I first saw this card on like eBay or something, it was like, oh my gosh, I think I need to get this for a Diamond Star example someday. And so I did last year at the National. I picked that up. Here's another example. When I saw this, I was like, my gosh, I think I need to get this card for a DeLong example. And just the DeLong cards themselves are amazing. And I managed to pick that one up very early this year, I think it was. Just 2 super cool uses of color in cards that, it's a vintage thing. Maybe that should be a hashtag. It's a vintage thing. And then here's another one that's not quite the rainbow, but I really love the use of color on this card. And, it's pretty off-center, but I'm just pulled in by the red and blue contrast more than anything, with the touch of green in the background, some orange on his jersey. I just think that's a fantastic baseball card. Absolutely love that. So those are just a few examples of multicolor, use of multicolor in cards, vintage cards that just I really like. But then sometimes it's just a solid block of color that also really pulls me in. And here are 3 examples of this. I shared this recently, the second-year Ernie Banks. I just love that red background, that red gradient. This to me, this is a striking second-year Ernie Banks card. Like his second-year card versus other stars of the day. I think this might be, if not the best second-year card, it's right up there. I absolutely love that card, and I loved picking that up just a couple of months ago, actually. Here's another one. I've shown this a few times and have talked about how this is probably my favorite card of the 1954 Topps set. Just love the light blue color on that. Just a really cool card. And here's another one that I actually picked this up in Strongsville earlier this year. And I bought it raw, sent it in SGC, actually came back a 3. It's just a Tommy Henrik card. I just love that back. It's like, you don't see too many cards with like chartreuse coloring in the background. It's just another striking example that kind of got my attention of a Yankee who was a key role player on a lot of championships, and he's represented on a fantastic baseball card, 1941 play ball. So just the use of color, creative use of color, the bold use of color sometimes can just really pull me in ways that today's cards just don't. going to show a few more cards here and we'll call it a video. Here's just an overall, whether it's color, artful portrait. I've shown this card a few times. This, I just think this, to me, in some ways, is almost a perfect baseball card. He's not even holding a bat or a glove or a ball. He's just looking off the not at the camera, but off, which I actually really like when they do that. It's pregame, probably batting practice before a game. Slugger of his era, Hall of Famer. Centering on this card happens to be really good. But I just love the balance of color with the gold and the pennant and just the kind of purplish blue and kind of how it works with the cap. And it's just, to me, this is like an absolutely exquisite baseball card. So I just love showing this every once in a while. It's just, in terms of an example of what I just think is it's like a vintage card. It's just a great example of a vintage baseball card. 1965 Topps Harmon Killebrew. All right. I also like the personalities of the game, and I like how they kind of have fascinating stories, and so that speaks to history and making connections. And one player and manager for me who does that is Leo DeRocher. I just have he's a character of the game for sure, but he is a very unique. He has a unique role in the game in the 20th century, in my opinion, just from the span of years that he was a manager and then a player before that. And so I wanted to show on my channel, I think for the first time actually, the 3 cards of his that I have that span, 4+ decades of him just managing. Now, he wasn't continuously managing for all those years, but he was for the majority of those years. It's the 1939 play ball. He was a player manager for the Dodgers here. He had won a championship with the Gashouse Cardinals 5 years prior, and his career actually started with the 28-29 Yankees, actually. Here's him with the New York Giants as manager, 53 Bowman color. I just love that portrait of him. It's a beautiful card, in my opinion. And then this one, 72 Topps. It's actually autographed by him. Really, it's a faint faded signature, but I just love that card too. Just again, how the years that he influenced the game of baseball. I just like how these 3 cards kind of show that. All the great players that he managed, played with. I just think he occupies a rather unique spot in the game, in my opinion. And in that regard, from a manager's standpoint, so does this guy. Having a card like this is a T205 John McGraw SGC3. Growing up, reading some baseball, books that were like made for kids. You see the name John McGraw. He just seems so like off in the distance in terms of time, decades, a century ago or whatever. He just like what was that time like? And vintage cards are like a portal. They're like a portal that can bring you back and just make it in a way, and bring you back in your mind. And it's a mind trip, I guess. But having this card actually in hand, this is from 1911. He wasn't even at his peak yet managing. He was still he managed for about 30 years with the Giants, won 10 pennants. And he was, he had gotten started. He was winning championships by this point, but, and he had a few more to go. But, actually, he may have won most of his World Series, actually, in the first 10 to 12 years he was managing them. But he was, known to be one of the all-time greats for all roughly 30 years he was managing the New York Giants. And he's just sort of like one of those lions of the game. And he played in the 1890s and won a couple of NL championships, I think, when he was playing. So with the original Baltimore Orioles. I believe he was a third baseman, I think it was. And he played with Huey Jennings, actually, which I only got to know that. Here's another learning piece and connection. So it's like I need a Huey Jennings card at some point because I have a thing for managers or player managers, and he was a player manager himself. And knowing that he played with John McGraw in the same infield, I want to get his card, a card of his at some point. So, But it just, again, the stories and the threads that kind of you can start to unravel by that I've been able to unravel through building a vintage baseball card collection has been really super enjoyable. So I got a couple more cards. I got about 3 or 4 more cards I want to share here, and then we'll wrap it up. I'm going to do one more kind of like interesting, kind of connection. This is more of a connection thing. So I remember I was looking up one time about 2 years ago, ball players who I share a birthday with. And interestingly enough, from a modern sense, I actually share a birthday with Jason Dominguez, the Yankees prospector, hopefully superstar, future superstar, but, we'll see. But I found that pretty interesting. But another guy who I kind of just sort of did some research on and just read about him, just a fascinating guy in baseball himself. Not a Hall of Famer or anything, but a very successful manager and a pretty successful player. He was more of a backup catcher. This is Pat Moran. I've shown this card a couple of times maybe before, but not in a while. It's currently the only T206 card I have in my collection. It's a sovereign back. He was a player. He was a backup catcher on the Chicago Cubs World Series teams in 06, 07, 08, that era. And then he ended up he was the manager of the 1919 Cincinnati Reds, the team that beat the Black Sox that year. 4 years prior, he was managing the Philadelphia Phillies to their first National League pennant. He was the first manager to take 2 different teams to the World Series, which I think is really cool. And, I did some, just didn't really actively research, but just sort of organically through, reading things on the Saber website, like his bio or other bios, and just, hearing people talk about cards and eBay listings, I came across an amazing card of a player who this guy managed on the 1915 Phillies, and realized he grew up in the area where I live now. I'm not from Michigan. I live in Michigan. I grew up in New York, but I've been in Michigan for many years at this point. And this guy, his name is William Killefer. Turned out he grew up in this area, where I am in the Kalamazoo area. And the fact that I saw this on this card got me really interested in picking up this card last year. And so, the Cracker Jack cards are just amazing cards. I'm actually going to take it out of the sleeve on this one, but then I'll leave it on camera here as we wrap this up. But it's just a really cool card. This guy was manager of this guy on the 1915 Phillies. This is 1915 Cracker Jack. William Killefer's main contribution to the game. He was actually a manager for a short time. He was also more of a coach, actually. He got a world championship as a coach later, like in the 20s. But he was Grover Cleveland Alexander's personal catcher for a long, long time. So that's his main kind of what he's most known for in baseball. But yeah, it's just cards like this. When you have the opportunity to hold, let alone own a Cracker Jack card, these things are just, there's something about vintage that just is that does it for me. And then, speaking of, Southwest Michigan, where I'm from right now, I realized that even before I got these, that here's a player that I came across that is still lives here in Southwest Michigan, Charlie Maxwell. I sent a card out to him to have autographed, and he did that last year, and I picked up this one I happen to love. Here's another example of color. I love those pink backgrounds on 58 tops. So it's just, it's things like that just pull me in, keep me in, enjoying vintage baseball cards. And I'm going to wrap this up, actually, with one more card that is, again, it's a connection thing for myself. It's a non-sports card, actually. Showed it once before. I ended up getting it graded earlier this year. So this is my alma mater, Drake University. And I didn't realize that there was a college university series of tobacco cards made. This is a 1910 Murad T51 Drake University College Series. So I bought this raw, and ended up wanting to get it slabbed just from a personal standpoint. I mean, it was literally, I got it for like $5 or $6. This is a typical Packer stamp, as they call them. It's on almost every one of these cards, so I don't think it factors into grading. But just seeing the seal of the college I graduated from, I mean, this thing is on my diploma for getting my degree, so it's just that's just really cool to see. I mean, it's a really cool, it's a nice use of color and stuff, but I'm drawn to the pennant and the seal more than anything else on this card. And I actually had a I emailed Vintage Card Pricing, or Vintage Card Price VCP, because they didn't have this card in their registry, so I actually emailed them about it, and they put it on there as one of the cards that are out there. So who knows? This might be the only slabbed example of this card. It probably is, for all I know. But anyway, that is, in a very large nutshell, why I love vintage James and Saul. And if you stuck around this long listening to me talk about it, I really appreciate it, and thank you everybody who may have done the same thing. I'm just throwing up a couple of cards here to wrap this up. Where's my other stand? There we go. Let's put the mic up one more time too. So yeah, it's just getting back into the hobby a few years ago has been a really, really special part. I mean, it's safe to say it's been a special part of my life. It really has been. So who'd have thunk that pieces of cardboard can do that? But there's something about these that do. So thanks again, everybody, for watching. Enjoy the LCSs coming up. Let's take it back to present day. Enjoy those LCSs. I think we got 2 fantastic matchups. Should be a fun week in that regard. And I will see you all in the next video. All right, take care.